Steven Seagal was the immovable force of late 80s and early 90s action films. A presence so commanding that just walking into frame felt like a promise of justice. Under Siege turned him into a worldwide box office powerhouse. He wasn't only playing strength, he projected it quiet, contained, and deadly efficient. But the legend on screen carried wounds off-screen. 3 marriages that fell apart, a career that crested and then slid, and the slow, painful realization that the empire he'd built could loosen piece by piece. And now at 71, the storms feel heavier and lonelier. What sits behind the stoic face? What truths and regrets remain? Let's walk through the life behind the myth. Before the lights and red carpets, even breathing was a battle. Stephen Frederick Seagal was born on April 10, 1952, in Lansing, Michigan, to a modest family. His father Samuel taught math. His mother, Patricia, was a medical technician. Money was tight, but love and sacrifice were abundant. Stephen was a frail child, and asthma wrapped itself around his early years. Nights were measured in shallow breaths and worried footsteps. He watched other kids run while he pressed his forehead to the window, wishing his lungs would cooperate. The teasing at school left scars you couldn't see. By 1957, his parents made a hard choice. Escape Michigan winters for California warmth. They packed up and moved to Fullerton. The sunshine helped, and with it came the first hint of a new self. For the first time, he could breathe and move without fear. That relief planted a seed. He would chase strength not as a vanity, but as survival. That drive carried him a long way across the Pacific. In fact, in 1974, at 22, he went to Japan, where traditional Aikido dojus were still guarded spaces. Being an American, there wasn't a shortcut. It was a target on your back. Respect had to be earned, fall after fall, on hard tatami. He met Mayo Fujitani, the daughter of a respected Aikido master in Osaka, herself a black belt and teacher. Through Mako, Seagal didn't just find love. He found a doorway into a tradition most foreigners never entered. The training was unforgiving. Students challenged him. Masters tested him. Pain was the language. Persistence the reply. But slowly something shifted. Technique sharpened. Movement flowed. And the outsider became an instructor. Eventually, he helped run a dojo, one of the first Americans to do so in Japan. For a boy who once struggled to breathe, standing among masters felt like victory, etched in bruise and bone. Still, ambition kept pushing. By the early 1980s, he felt the walls of the dojo were too small for the fire inside him. He returned to the U.S. with Aikido in his body and big dreams in his head. In 1983, at 31, Seagal opened an Aikido dojo in West Hollywood with Haruo Ma. It wasn't glamorous. It was rent notices, empty mats, and long nights sweeping floors under humming fluorescent lights. Some students tried a class and left, convinced Aikido was more dance than discipline. To keep the lights on, he took behind the camera jobs as a martial arts coordinator. The challenge, 1982, and Never Say Never Again, 1983. Useful work, yes, but he wanted to show the world the art he lived. Agents passed. Executives shrugged. Hollywood could not picture him until it suddenly could. In 1988, at 36, Seagal broke through with Above the Law. It wasn't flash. It was force. The fights felt real because they were built from what he knew. Leverage, timing, ruthlessness. He didn't posture. He ended fights. Audiences noticed. So did the industry. Then came the hammer blows. Hard to Kill, 1990. Marked for Death, 1990. Out for Justice, 1991. He was the quiet avenger who didn't need many words to own a room. In 1992, Under Siege crowned that run as Casey Ryback, the ex-Navy SEAL turned ship's cook who dismantles terrorists aboard the USS Missouri. He delivered taut suspense and controlled fury. The film took in over 150 million worldwide and became a landmark of the era. For a moment, he stood shoulder to shoulder with Stallone, Schwarzenegger, and Van Damme, reshaping how efficiency and stillness could define an action hero. But winds were shifting. By the mid-1990s, the muscle-driven action wave was ebbing. In 1994, he directed On Deadly Ground, his passion project heavy with environmental themes. It was meant to broaden his image. Instead, critics gutted it and audiences stayed away. He later admitted it came from the heart. Maybe too much. Too soon there were more big swings. Under Siege 2, Dark Territory, 1995. Executive Decision, 1996. But the footing wasn't as firm. Slowly, the theatrical marquee gave way to direct-to-DVD releases. For someone who once commanded global box office, seeing your name on a plastic case in a bargain bin is its own kind of heartbreak. I've known pain since I was a boy, he recalled. But nothing hurt like watching everything I built slip away. When film no longer gave him a full voice, he turned to an older companion, the guitar. In 2005, he released Songs from the Crystal Cave, followed by Mojo Priest in 2006. The albums weren't swagger, they were a man trying to sing what he felt. Critics weren't kind. Late-night jokes were cheaper than listening. He kept playing anyway, sometimes too small rooms, because not everything you love needs applause to be real. He tried business lanes, too. A video game concept, Deadly Honor, never crossed the finish line. An energy drink with his name flickered out. Fragrances and martial arts collectibles came and went. The marketplace can be colder than any reviewer. The hardest blow wasn't a product failure. It was watching a Tennessee estate, once listed at $3.9 million, sit and sit until it sold for barely $500,000. It felt like watching a monument weather into sand. The personal story was just as complicated. In Japan, Seagal married Mai Fujitani in 1974. They had 2 children and, for a time, stability. But when he returned to the U.S., distance stretched the marriage thin until it broke. He later admitted, "I wanted the world. In chasing it, I lost the people who mattered most." Back in America, he married actress Adrienne. It happened quickly and ended just as quickly. No scandals, no children, just the realization that you can't patch loneliness with a wedding band. Then came the high-profile chapter with Kelly LeBrock, an iconic face of the 80s. For a while, it looked like the fairy tale, an action superstar, and a screen siren. 3 children, a home that seemed full of laughter, but fame is corrosive when you're never home. Whispers of infidelity, some tabloid noise, some harder to ignore, gnawed at trust. His career stumbled in 1994, just as the marriage began to crack in public. Divorce brought custody fights and financial headlines fed on the pain. He said later, quietly, "I lost things I can never get back." In the 2000s, he finally found something gentler. He met Erdinachua Elabatsek, a Mongolian-born ballroom dancer, who first worked with him as a translator. She saw the man under the myth, tired, imperfect, still searching for peace. Their bond grew away from the cameras. Marriage came. Then their son, Kung Shang. For Seagal, already a father of other children. It felt like undeserved grace, a second chance to be present. Even while knowing you can't rewrite missed birthdays or quiet nights, you weren't there to soothe. Time, of course, presents its own bill. The body that built a legend doesn't stay bulletproof. Decades of falls, locks, and impacts leave a ledger in wrists, shoulders, hips, and knees. One rehearsal even ended with a chokeout and a sudden collapse. Proof that the floor always wins. Eventually, by his 50s, the movement changed. The circles got smaller, the steps more careful. Directors adapted shots. Stunt teams took more load. Fans who remembered the snap of his throws felt a pang. Speed yields to strength. Strength yields to craft. Craft negotiates with pain. He learned to work with what remained. Heat pads before dawn. Stretching in the dark, measured steps, careful chairs, and that small hand to the lower back when the spine complains. He once said, "Every step I take now, I remember the battles that put me here." There's dignity in that. Continuing even when you no longer look like the story others tell about you. Today, his world is quieter. He keeps a fortress-like place in Arizona, bulletproof glass, samurai statues, an infinity pool pouring into desert sky. It reads like a castle, but it's really a refuge after long storms. The Tennessee mansion is gone. Once $3.9 million, finally sold for barely $500,000. What remains is enough, an estimated fortune around $14 million. Not the fortune of peers who stayed on the biggest screens longer, but sufficient for peace. In his garage, a 1973 Mustang with a rebellious growl, a stalwart 1987 Chevrolet Caprice, a rare Jaguar XJ220, a Mercedes GLE, less trophies than relics of a life once lived at full throttle. More important than the medal is the table at home. With Elle and their son Kunzang, he lives a later life chapter that's calmer. Across the decades, he's the father of 7 children and now a grandfather. The pride is real, so is the ache of time you can't get back. He meditates, does light martial arts practice, and eats with more discipline. The mirror tells the truth. Lines on the face, a heavier frame, speed traded for steady presence. Work happens here and there. Smaller projects, evenings are more likely to be family dinners than premieres. And somewhere within that routine is the quiet grief of knowing the thunder past, and the equally quiet relief of not needing the thunder anymore. What should we take from the arc? Not gossip, not myth, something simpler. Steven Seagal left a distinct fingerprint on action cinema. Stillness as menace, efficiency as poetry. His rise was improbable. His fall was painful. His survival through music, side hustles, fam,